After sitting down to watch Falcons games, I can tell you why Zack Robinson's offense is going to be perfect for Baker Mayfield and the Bucs weapons. That and more on today's episode of Locked On Bucs.
You are Locked On Buccaneers, your daily Tampa Bay Buccaneers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, and welcome into this episode of Locked On Bucs, your daily podcast covering the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, now the #1 sports podcast network. I'd like to thank you for making Locked On Bucs your first listen review every day. I'm your host, James Yarcho, writer over at Bucs Report, here with you every Monday through Friday, along with the everydayers. For that, I want to share my appreciation for your continued support of the show. Mock Draft Mondays are back. We're going to react to one mock draft, and we're going to do our first of the year. That's all coming up in a little bit. First and foremost, I hope all of you are safe and warm after that winter storm rolled through over the weekend, but it helped me sit down and do exactly what I did to kick this thing off, talking more about Zack Robinson. As promised, I sat down and I watched a bunch of Falcons games over the weekend while there was over a foot of snow coming down outside of my house. I did a full review with specific plays and video for the All Access members. So if you want to check that out, you're going to want to click the link in the show notes. But even without all that stuff, I want to talk to everyone about some of my takeaways here. And I'm going to start by saying I watched games that I chose at random from 2024 and 2025. My only caveat was no Falcons Bucs. I was not going to watch those. We knew how those went. I wanted to see how this offense operated against other teams. You know, I didn't want to focus on games where I knew that the offense put up a ton of points or anything like that. So I picked games at random, and as a result, every game that I watched was actually a loss for the Falcons. And I came away from that project even more excited about what we could see from Robinson in Tampa. A lot of these route concepts, a lot of these designs are really, really good. Not all of them. There was some stuff that I didn't care for at all, some things that didn't really make a lot of sense to me. But the overall takeaway is this. When you sit down and you watch and you swap out Cousins or Penix for Baker Mayfield, London for Evans, Mooney for Godwin or Ibuka, McLeod for McMillan or Tez, you have an unbelievable amount of potential for this offense. The plays that I highlighted showed exactly why this was a good hire. There were just too many times over the course of 2024 and 2025 when either the quarterback threw a bad pass, held the ball too long, or never came off of his first read. That led to execution issues and stalled the offense. Of course, those things will happen with Baker from time to time. It happens to every quarterback, but not to the extent that I saw with Atlanta. When Cousins was on top of his game, these were chunk plays that were designed to create mismatches or get specific players open. And a big way that he did that was using tons of motion. There was one play in particular where he had twins right, two tight ends to the left. He sends one tight end in motion to the right to set up trips, but then he turns around and sends a receiver in motion to the left. This caused the defense. Everyone on the defense shifted to their left. And then they all overcompensated and shifted back to the right because of the mismatch created by the wide receiver moving to that side of the field. It ended up giving the Falcons the exact matchup they wanted. You had a blocker for every defender, and it opened up a running lane for Bijan to break off a 12-yard play. It was absolutely outstanding. Another thing that I noticed with Robinson, and I'm not sure exactly how it's going to translate to the Bucs, was the personnel. It was rare to see fewer than 3 receivers on the field. In fact, more often than not, if there were only 2 receivers out there, it was a run. That set up a huge gain on a play because the defense played the run where Robinson called a play action that made everyone bite. London was wide open. But that was a moment where he sets up using 2 receivers in run plays, then sends out a 2-receiver set, hits him with the play action, and boom, you have a chunk play to Drake London. But for the most part, it was 3 and 4 receiver sets every single time. The translation I'm curious about is the utilization of Kyle Pitts. There were a lot of 3 receiver sets where you still had Pitts split away from the line and essentially used as a fourth receiver. So that 3 receiver set was actually a 4 receiver set. The 4 receiver set was actually a 5 receiver set. Pitts didn't do much blocking, and obviously Cade Otton is not a one-for-one swap with Pitts. I think Otton is back and is the tight end 1 for this offense in 2026. So I'm excited and I'm curious to see how Robinson kind of shakes things up in terms of his tight end utilization, because we know the Bucs have more than enough receivers to send 3, 4, or 5 out there on any given play without worrying about the tight end. It's just a matter of how does that shake up the routes when you're replacing Pitts with an actual receiver or Cade Otton. I also noticed that Robinson is really good about doing something early in a game to set up something later. I just mentioned one example in particular, that chess match that I always talk about being so important that Grizzard just couldn't figure out. I mentioned the 2 receiver sets they would always run out of and then hit him with a play action out of the same formation in a big game. He does that a lot, especially with his motion. One play, he sent Ray McLeod in motion, handed it to him on an end around, and then in another game, exact same formation, exact same motion, and then hits him with a play action to McLeod, and then finds Bijan wide open on a swing pass for a huge gain. The defense had seen that play on tape, shifted their entire alignment to stack the left side for the offense, right side for the defense, because they knew what was coming, and then they left the most dangerous player on the field wide open in the flat. Like I said, it wasn't all sunshine and rainbows. There was a play that I pointed out where you had 2 receivers running the exact same route side by side. So instead of one clearing out some of the defenders to free up his teammate, the 2 ran into a crowd of 4 defenders. Credit to Kirk Cousins, he completed the pass and it was a first down, but that was a dangerous throw and a poor concept. I'm not trying to run 2 guys into the exact same spot. Yep, that's just asking for trouble. To be fair, that could have been a mistake by one of the receivers if it was an option route and he ran the wrong one. But if that was the actual design by Robinson, he can go ahead and leave that one in Atlanta. Real quick, I do want to show you all this formation. And I thought it was fantastic. I would love to see it in Tampa. But for those of you watching on YouTube, you can see I have a screenshot of it. It is a 3-back set on the goal line. So the Falcons are lined up. They are on the 1-yard line. And you have a tight end, you have Tyler Algier, and you have Bijan Robinson all lined up at about the 6-yard line in a straight line. After the snap, you had the tight end and Algier both breaking to the left, looking like they were about to block. Cousins turns around, hands the ball off to Bijan, and all of the defenders overcompensate, trying to get guys over there where they see Algier and the tight end setting up to block. Bijan runs it right up the middle because the defense overcompensated and left the middle of the field wide open. It was a brilliant play design. I'd love to see it in Tampa with Bucky, Tucker, maybe Algier if they sign him in free agency, and then Keeft as that 3rd guy. I think that would be absolutely outstanding. The last thing that I'm going to mention is Robinson's not just willingness, but his propensity to spread the defense out as much as possible. That goes back to the 3 and 4 receiver sets and then using a ton of motion. There was one play when he went 5 wide, including Bijan, just to hit a quick pass, that everyone had one-on-one looks, hits that quick pass, moves the sticks, and keeps going. There were plenty of alignments where Bijan was split out wide. Algier was still in the backfield as the running back. He looks to create those mismatches for his receivers, for his playmakers, and his run game by getting the defense as spread out as possible. Even when he has trips on one side in a bunch formation, he's going to move one in motion before the snap to get the defense moving around a little bit and start to create those opportunities for the pre-snap reads. This all confirmed to me what Aaron Freeman of Locked On Falcons told me. Play calling wasn't the issue in Atlanta. It was quarterback play. It was lack of weapons. It was lack of execution. And I purposely watched games from both seasons with both quarterbacks, and you could tell that the playbook for Penix was a little smaller than the one for Kirk Cousins. Robinson is 100% true to his word. He schemes for his players, does not force his players into his scheme. So expect the exact same thing in Tampa. Robinson now has an upgraded offensive line. He's upgraded at receiver from top to bottom, and he is especially upgraded at quarterback. You have a slight downgrade at running back, then a downgrade as far as pass catching tight end. But a lot of these formations and concepts are going to translate even better to the Buccaneers because of those receivers and the protection that his quarterback has on top of Baker's ability to get those pre-snap reads. He's one of the best in the business, and then to get through his progressions. It won't be perfect. No offense is, but I can promise you that from what I watched for hours over the weekend, from what Robinson has already put on tape, this offense is going to be dangerous. It's the long-awaited, highly anticipated return of Mock Draft Monday. We take a look at what Pro Football Network has for the Bucs in their latest 7-round mock. That is coming up next on today's episode of Locked On Bucs, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Game is almost here, and there's no better way to stay locked into every moment than with Prize Picks, the daily fantasy app where it always feels good to be right. With football season coming down to the final stretch, now is the perfect time to close out strong. Prize Picks makes watching the game even more exciting by letting you build simple lineups around player projections. No drafts, no waiting, just football action all the way through the playoffs. Prize Picks is incredibly easy to get started. Pick 2 or more players and choose more or less on their projections. It's the best way to keep playing fantasy football even after season-long leagues are finished. My favorite feature, the early payouts. It lets you cash out if a player gets off to a hot start. Download the Prize Picks app today and use code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code LOCKEDONNFL for $50 in lineups after your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks, it's good to be right. No one knows your money goals better than you. Robinhood puts you in control of your money with tools that work as hard as you do. Locking in on every opening, beating your PR, beating it again. Channel that drive into your money. Robinhood puts you in control. Trade stocks and ETFs, options, futures, crypto, all in one platform. You can now build and execute your own trades from a desktop with Robinhood Legends advanced tools. Or take advantage of the new Robinhood strategies with a tailored portfolio managed by a team of experts. You expect more from yourself, expect more from your money. Get started today at Robinhood.com/yourmoney. Again, that's Robinhood.com/yourmoney. Your money, your move. Thank you again for making Locked On Bucs your first listen review every day. And thank you for making Locked On the #1 sports podcast network. Cannot thank you all enough for that. If you haven't already, check out the Everydayer Club. I mentioned I do the All 22 Zack Robinson film review. There is an all-access episode over there. It's over an hour long where I showed 22 different plays with 2 different quarterbacks over the course of a couple of seasons, and it's right there. Check it out. The link is in the show notes. Pro Football Network dropped a full 7-round mock, and it seems as though, for starters, every single person has Jeremiah Love going to the Saints. You guys want to see me crash out in real time? Watch me if the Saints draft him. That will be very bad news for the Bucs, very bad news for the rest of the NFC South, and my son and I will both probably have aneurysms. Anyway, the consensus is that the Bucs are going heavy on defense, which makes sense because that's where they have the most needs and the most holes to fill. Bear in mind, these are pre-free agency mocks. These can change in a hurry based on what players the Bucs are able to sign or want to sign, as well as other teams. If other teams address their biggest draft need in free agency, all of a sudden, that's not their biggest draft need, and they're going to move on to a different position and a different player. That's all going to start in about a month and a half. But here's what Pro Football Network did. And, they didn't attribute a specific author for this mock, but I mentioned that everyone had the Bucs going defense heavy, everyone except for Pro Football Network. At 15, they have the Bucs going with Kenyon Sadiq, the tight end out of Oregon. And here's what was said. Quote, I don't love going pass catcher in the first for the second straight year. The Bucs are in something of a peculiar spot, picking in the middle of the draft with their needs. There's reason to believe it's too early to address the edges of their defense or the interior of their offense, and starting tight end Cade Otton is an impending free agent. Thus, it's reasonable to expect a premium pick spent on the dynamic Oregon tight end. The 6'3", 245-pound tapped into who he is as an athletic weapon to the tune of 51 receptions for 560 yards and 8 touchdowns this season. There's a sufficient level of want-to in the box that can keep him on the field when they get into 12 personnel. That will make Baker Mayfield happy, end quote. Okay, first and foremost, no, absolutely not. The reasoning here is insane. The Bucs are in a peculiar spot. In what way exactly? They need players at all 3 levels of the defense. They need starters in the front 2 levels of the defense. And you go with a tight end because Cade Otton's a pending free agent and you don't want to address those defensive needs at 15. I will say, Sadiq is incredible. I talked about not knowing how Robinson would change things up to replace Pitts in the Bucs offense. Well, there's your answer. That's a 1-for-1 swap, but this is not the pick. You still had Cassius Howell, the edge from Texas A&M, on the board, who was the Bucs pick in Daniel Jeremiah's first, 1-round mock draft. Caleb Banks, the defensive tackle from Florida. Caden McDonald, the defensive tackle from Ohio State. Akeem Mesidor, the edge from Miami. C.J. Allen, the linebacker from Georgia. All of these would have been a better use of the 15th pick than a tight end. Unless the plan is for Bowles to just keep doing what he's been doing in the offense to just score 40 points a game, the Cincinnati Bengals method. So we're off to a rough start in this mock. At 46, they have the Bucs taking T.J. Parker, the edge rusher from Clemson. Not sure I love this pick considering how much of a step back he took from 2024 to 2025, but that's stat scouting on my part, and I will fully admit that. I would have to go back and watch some Clemson games. I'm sure I will over the course of draft season to really see what the difference was between 2024 Parker and 2025 Parker. But overall, we're moving in the right direction here with addressing a big need. At 77, it's Josiah Trotter, the linebacker from Missouri. This is a guy that can compete for a starting job. He's got the juice. He has some speed, some serious explosiveness. He's not a plug-and-play starter, in my opinion. This is a move that you make if you signed a starter in free agency. Then you draft this guy that can come in, compete with Servassier Dennis. Maybe Voss is your starter at the beginning of the season, and then Trotter can take over at some point during the season. It doesn't completely solve the linebacker issue, but it does address it and shows that they're starting to move in a different direction. In the 4th round, at 116, they have the Bucs taking Katron Allen, the running back from Penn State. I'm good with this. If you don't sign a running back in free agency, getting this guy on day 3 is a good move. He can run, he can catch, he can block. This is the Rashad replacement that can complement Bucky in the offense. Solid pick. Moving on. In the 5th at 153, quarterback Cade Klubnik from Clemson. Again, no. I realize it's a 5th round pick, but this would now be the 3rd player taken on the offensive side. Sign a backup in free agency and move on. You don't need to waste draft capital on a player that will not see the field and certainly is not going to be your plan to develop into a starting quarterback. You had Xavier Harris, the defensive tackle from Ole Miss, taken with the very next pick. That is a better fit for what the Bucs need right now. Lander Barton, the linebacker from Utah. Jay-Sean Barrow, the edge from Michigan. These are better picks for this team in this spot that were available at pick 153. 6th round, pick 193. Caleb Proctor, defensive tackle from Southeastern Louisiana. It's the 6th round. You're looking to build depth here. Maybe you catch lightning in a bottle, but anything in the trenches on either side of the ball at this stage, it's good with me. You want to go defensive line? Great. You want to go depth at offensive line in the interior? Great. I'm good with it. It's a 6th round pick. We'll see if it pans out. Finally, in the 7th at pick 229, Dejon Stribling, wide receiver out of Ole Miss. maybe if they feel that he can be an upgrade over Cam Johnson in the return game, or they need a seventh receiver on the roster, feels a little bit like a wasted pick here, but it's the 7th round. It's all dart throws. I'm not going to lash out the way that I did over a tight end in the 1st or a quarterback in the 5th. Overall, I'm giving this draft a D+. I love Sadiq, and if he's the pick for the Bucs, I'll be excited about what he can do in Robinson's offense, but I'm going to look at what players on the defensive side the Bucs passed on in order to take it. Taking more offensive players than defensive players in this one was an absolutely wild approach. We're going to see if I can do any better than that mock with one of my own. That is coming up next on today's episode of Locked On Bucs. If you've ever hired someone who looked good on paper but wasn't the right fit, you know how important that is. When you want candidates who truly match what you're looking for, trust Indeed sponsored jobs. If you're hiring, Indeed is all you need. Stop struggling to get your job post seen on other sites. Indeed's sponsored jobs puts your post at the top of the page and helps you reach the right candidates faster. Indeed sponsored jobs helps your listing stand out and reach quality candidates faster. They boost your post to the people who are the best match for your role, and that makes the real difference. Spend more time interviewing candidates who check all of your boxes with less stress, less time, more results using Indeed sponsored jobs. Listeners of this show get a $75 sponsored job credit to help give your job the premium placement it deserves at Indeed.com/LockedOnNFL. Just go to Indeed.com/LockedOnNFL right now and support the show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Wrapping things up here on a mock draft Monday edition of the Locked On Bucs podcast, and it's time to do the first mock draft of our own. You guys know I'll do a bunch of these, and a lot of them are going to be situational. I'm going to force certain positions into the first round to see how the rest of the board falls. I'll do no trades. I'll trade every pick, either up or down. This one is going to be pretty straightforward. I'm going into this one under the assumption that both Mike Evans and Cade Otton return on the offensive side, and that Greg Gaines and Logan Hall return on the defensive side. Those seem like the most likely players to return. That's what I have in my head as we go through this. I am using the PFF mock draft simulator, no trades, all 7 rounds. Right off the bat, of course, you have Mendoza going in the first to the Raiders. Then some notable defensive players are gone. Arvell Reese goes to the Jets, David Bailey to the Titans, Reuben Bain to the Browns, which is absolutely crazy. Garrett and Bain coming off the edges is absolutely lethal. The Saints get Carnell Tate, so 2 Ohio State receivers there in New Orleans now. Keldrick Falk, the edge from Auburn, he goes to the Kansas City Chiefs. Peter Woods goes to Cincinnati. Cassius Howell to Miami. Caleb Banks goes to Baltimore. So of the first 14 picks in this mock draft, 9 of them are on the defensive side. Best players available here for the Bucs are Ohio State linebacker Sonny Styles. You have LSU corner Mansour Delane, Ohio State defensive lineman Caden McDonald, Clemson edge rusher TJ Parker, and Georgia linebacker CJ Allen. Again, there was the drop-off for Parker from 2024 to 2025, went from 12 sacks to 6, received his lowest grade in 3 years from PFF last season, but the pass rush win rate is at 15.5%. Run defense is really solid. He's in strong consideration here. I think ultimately I'm going to play it safe. Sonny Styles is a name you're going to hear a lot tied to the Bucs. He is a plug-and-play starter ranked as the number 10 prospect overall on PFF. Run defense grade is nearly a 90. Coverage grade is outstanding, which is something the Bucs desperately need at linebacker. It's someone that can actually cover. So I'm going to go with Sonny Styles here. Back-to-back years taking a Buckeye in the first round. Second round, there's a name that jumps out to me immediately of the players available. There's some good players here. Jake Golday, the linebacker from Cincinnati. Deontay Lawson, the linebacker from Bama. AJ Halsey, the safety from LSU. But to me, the obvious pick here is Zion Young, the edge rusher out of Missouri. 8 sacks last season, a grade of 85 from PFF. His run defense is graded at an 86.6. Pass rush is an 83. His pass rush win rate is 17.2%. That's higher than Parker, who we just considered at 15. Young is the guy here, and even if the Bucs sign Hendrickson or they trade for Crosby, Young is a player you want in that arsenal. He would immediately replace Braswell and upgrade the overall rotation at the edge spot. Round 3, another edge guy, Anthony Lucas from USC is sitting there. Julian Neal, the corner from Arkansas. Darrell Jackson Jr., the defensive lineman from Florida State. Danny Dennis Sutton, the edge from Penn State. But then I see one of my draft crushes for this year. Texas Tech linebacker Jacob Rodriguez. This guy graded out at a 93 with a 94.8 in run defense, a 92.3 in coverage, only a 61.4 in pass rush. That's fine. That's not his game. That's not his specialty. He is the sideline to sideline guy that can cover and can stop the run. 124 total tackles last season, second in college football in coverage stops in 2025. This dude is an absolute beast. He was in talks for the Heisman race, a huge reason that Texas Tech was as good as they were. Now, I don't know if I can really justify pulling the trigger here for another off-ball linebacker for the second time in 3 rounds. He's getting knocked down the board because he's small, 6'1", 235. But I have a hard time not taking him, knowing the Bucs need 2 linebackers. Do you want to start 2 rookies in Bowles' defense? That's another big question, but you're talking about a duo that could run the middle of the Bucs defense for the next decade. You can never have too many edge rushers. You need a corner to replace Jamel Dean. You need help along the defensive line, but you know what? Let's have some fun. I'm taking Jacob Rodriguez here, and we're going to see how the rest of the draft shakes out. Things get a little dicey here in the 4th round. Lots of quarterbacks and tight ends at the top of the best players available list. You have Michael Taffy, the safety from Texas. Other than that, tight ends, Josh Cuevas from Alabama, Joe Royer from Cincinnati, Eli Raridan from Notre Dame. Quarterbacks, Cade Klubnik from Clemson, Drew Aller from Penn State. I'll tell you a name I'm intrigued here. That intrigues me here at 116, DJ Campbell. He's a guard out of Texas, solid pass blocker, really good run blocker. 6'3", 320. You need depth at the interior here. Last season, Bredesen went down and Malk went down, and the Bucs, the interior of that line was an absolute disaster. I went into this saying that I assume Otten returns. I'm going to stick with that. I'm going to pass on these tight ends. I'm going to get depth along the offensive line. We're taking DJ Campbell, the Longhorn. 5th round pick, 153. Washington corner Takario Davis, Indiana linebacker Aiden Fisher, Arkansas running back Mike Washington Jr., Oklahoma running back Jaden Ott. I'll tell you what I like here. Tell me if you agree. A 6'2", 230-pound replacement for Rachaad White that can run the ball, catch the ball, and pick up the blitz. How about 21st in the nation in carries of 15 or more yards? How about 1,000 yards and 8 touchdowns on 167 carries? That's almost 6.5 yards per carry. How about another 28 receptions for 226 yards? Does that seem like a guy that could complement Bucky Irving and work in this offense? We're taking Mike Washington Jr. out of Arkansas. This kid is an absolute beast. He is going to be a great day 3 pick, a perfect complement, and fits into that running back room seamlessly. 6th round pick, 194 at this point. We're looking for upside. We're looking for depth. We have Devonta Smith, the corner out of Notre Dame, Vincent Anthony Jr., the edge from Duke, Sayer Wright, the corner from Nebraska, Zane Durant, defensive lineman from Penn State, James Thompson Jr., defensive lineman from Illinois. My first inclination is one of the corners. Both are a little bit smaller than you typically see Bowles go for, but I'm thinking in terms of depth and special teams. But you know what? Call me a homer if you want to. I think the pick here is James Thompson Jr., the defensive lineman from Illinois. 6'6", 310. This guy is not going to help your pass rush. That's not his game. This is your run stop. This is a depth piece that can go in for a play or two to spell Logan Hall or Kalijah Cansey. He's going to be great in 4th and short situations, great in goal line situations. Only 2 sacks last year, 6 sacks over the last 3 years, but an 11.2% run stop rate, graded out at an 80 for run defense. I have watched him plenty. He honestly reminds me of William Golston. He's not flashy. He's not a big name. He's a constant and consistent player that you can rely on to do his job. Last pick, 7th round pick, 229. We're at the pure take a chance dart throw portion of the draft where Jason Light seems to do relatively well. Lots of quarterbacks, running backs, tight ends sitting around here. Peyton Bowen, the safety from Oklahoma. Logan Fano, the edge from Utah. Jerry Wilson, a corner from Florida State. Mason Reiger, the edge from Wisconsin. I'm going to take my dart throw on Peyton Bowen. the safety from Oklahoma. Is he in as a free agent? You need some depth there on the back end behind Tyke Smith and Antoine Winfield Jr. You need a contributor on special teams. Bowen's okay. He's not great. He's average across the board. But in the 7th round, if you can get depth and a special teams contributor, that is a win. So to recap, we got linebacker Sonny Styles, edge rusher Zion Young, linebacker Jacob Rodriguez, guard DJ Campbell, running back Mike Washington Jr., defensive lineman James Thompson Jr., and safety Peyton Bowen. PFF gave me an overall grade of an A-. Those of you watching on YouTube see that there. They gave me an F for Thompson. And, okay, I realized that it could be considered a quote-unquote reach in terms of his rank compared to where I drafted him. But they also said that I should have drafted Indiana wide receiver Elijah Surratt over Jacob Rodriguez. Bucs don't need a receiver. So I would rather have the position that I need multiple of than to take yet another wide receiver in that spot. That is going to do it for this episode. Let me know in the YouTube comments what you thought of the mock draft, players that you liked, players that you didn't like. I know Sonny Styles is going to be a polarizing choice among Bucs fans. I know plenty that love him, plenty that do not like him. We're going to see. We're going to see how this all shakes out. But please check out everything going on Twitter at Locked On Bucs, at @JYarcho_Bucs, Instagram and TikTok at Locked On Bucs in both of those places. Follow on YouTube with the notifications turned on, as well as wherever you get your podcast. Check out the Everydayer Club in the All Access tier. The link is in the show notes. LockedOnBucs.supercast.com. You can check out that all 22 breakdown that I do of the Falcons and Zack Robinson. If you want to support the show, but you don't want to join the Everydayer Club, it's real simple. Like this episode on YouTube, leave a 5-star review wherever you get podcasts. It does help other Buccaneers fans find the show. Hope you all have an absolutely outstanding day. Stay safe, stay healthy, fire the cannons. I want to thank you so much for joining me right here on Locked On Bucs, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.